Hello everyone, Bill here from Wylock's Armory, and this is a crash course in Grimdark Future. Grimdark Future is one of several free, lightweight wargaming rule systems from OnePageRules. It was inspired by Warhammer 40k by Games Workshop, and you can use any model line for this game, but I like to use theirs. You'll enjoy this rule set if you're more a casual gamer, not so much into the competitive scene, really just looking for an excuse to set up all your models in your terrain and move them around and have a good time, finish a game in 2 to 3 hours rather than 5, and have free material as opposed to buying books every 2 years. If any of that sounds intriguing, then I think you'll find something to like in this rule set. It is revised with some frequency. As of the making of this video, I'm using version 2.10 of the rules, but they do change, so if you're watching this in the future and some of the points don't agree with what you see or the rules work differently, that's why. Sometimes substantive changes are made. Alright, enough talking, let's jump in and explore Grimdark Future. The core mechanic. Roll to hit, roll to defend, remove casualties. That's it in a nutshell. Every unit has a quality, a defense, and one or more weapons. Each weapon will tell you how many attacks it has, or how many dice to roll. Consider this unit of Battle Brothers. Their assault rifles have 1 attack, and since there are 5 models, you'll be rolling 5 dice to hit, hoping to meet or exceed their quality. In this case, their quality is a 3-up. Therefore, 1s and 2s are misses. I like to pick those out of the dice pile and place them aside, and now the defending player picks up the remaining hits and tries to defend against them. So supposing the target of this attack was this unit of 10 assault grunts, their defense is a 5-up, so the defending player rolls the dice. Any result of a 5 or 6 is a success, anything less is a wound, so in this case, 2 wounds got through, so the defending player removes 2 models from his unit. And now, later on when it comes time for that unit to attack, it will be down by 2 models, so that's less dice that they're going to be rolling. One important caveat: a natural 6 on the die is always a success no matter what you're doing, and a natural 1 on the die is always a failure no matter what you're doing. Everything else is a permutation on this fundamental mechanic. Unit special abilities, weapon special abilities, terrain conditions, many things come into play that will tweak some step of the simple process that we just walked through. It's almost never as plain vanilla as the example I just showed you, and it can get really interesting. So with that fundamental in place, let's start from the beginning. Flow of the game. The players will deploy their armies, and then the game consists of 4 rounds. In a round, every unit on the table will activate once. Players take turns activating their units, 1 unit at a time, back and forth, until all the units on the table have been activated, and then the round ends. It is helpful to use some sort of counter to mark a unit once it's been activated, and then clear away all of those counters at the end of the round. Victory conditions can vary greatly, and you can totally make up your own, which I do regularly, but the stock conditions from the core rules are whoever controls the most objective markers at the end of round 4 wins the game. Note that the round is shared and there are no phases in it. Very simply, player 1 activates one of his units, and then player 2 does the same, and back and forth until the end of the round. When a unit is activated, that means it performs a movement action, and then it performs its combat action, which can be a shooting attack or a melee attack, but not both. Models and units. A unit consists of 1 or more models. Often, big vehicles and monsters will only have 1 model in a unit. Infantry-type units, like groups of soldiers, that sort of thing, will usually have multiple models in a unit, 3 or 5 or 10. Here's the Battle Brothers army list. This is the menu from which you can build and customize your army. All units have some things in common. There's a number telling you how many models are in the unit. All units have a quality value. As we saw a moment ago, this value describes how effective the unit is when attacking, so lower is better. They also have a defense value. Again, lower is better because it's easier to roll. They have weapons, which we'll cover in the next segment. and they have special abilities, which are all laid out in the core rules. There's a list of allowable upgrade packages, and there's a point cost. This cost is for the unit, not per model, so a unit of Battle Brothers consists of 5 models, and it costs 150 points. Now as for weapons, weapons have 4 pieces of information. Their range is in units of inches. You'll use a tape measure at the table to see if weapons are within range of the target enemy model. If no range is listed, that means it is a melee weapon, and the unit must be in base contact with the enemy model in order to use it. The number of dice to roll when attacking, the notation is of the form A and then a number, in this case 3 attacks. The armor-piercing value modifies the target's defense roll by that amount. So, for example, a unit with a defense of 3 up that gets hit by a weapon with AP 2 rolls the dice as usual, but is not hoping for a 3 up, but rather a 5 up. If no AP is listed, then the weapon doesn't have any armor piercing. And last in the entry are any special abilities the weapon might have. If none are listed, then it has none. There are only a few weapon special keywords. They're very easy to memorize, and they're found in the core rules. Movement. When a unit is selected to be activated, it then has 4 options. Hold, which means don't move, and you can fire all of your ranged weapons. Advance, which means move up to 6 inches and fire all of your ranged weapons. Rush, which means move up to 12 inches, but you cannot fire any ranged weapons. Or Charge, move up to 12 inches and end up in base contact to initiate melee. When moving an individual model, ensure that no part of the model travels more than the intended distance. An easy way to keep track of this is measure from the front of the rim or the back of the rim and move the model so that the front or back ends up 6 inches away, or whatever distance you're doing. Also, a key tenet of the game is unit coherency. This is defined by each model being within 2 inches of another model and all models being within 6 inches of each other. You must maintain unit coherency. Shooting. If a unit makes a move that allows it to shoot, that is, hold or advance, it can shoot all of its weapons at any target or targets that are within line of sight and within range. For example, these 5 Battle Brothers have just completed their advance move, and their assault rifles have a range of 24 inches. The 3 frontmost models are within 24 inches of their target, but the back 2 are not. Those 2 will not roll any attack dice. So let's attack. The Battle Brothers have a quality of 3 up, and 3 of them are shooting. Assault rifles are 1 die each, so we roll 3 dice. 2 hits, 1 miss. Okay, now the defending player rolls to defend. The grunts have a defense of 5 up, and the defending player rolls, but both fail, so that's 2 wounds that get through, which means 2 grunts are removed from the board. The defending player chooses which models are removed, but cannot intentionally break unit coherency. Shooting at an enemy that is in cover means a penalty of 1 on all hit rolls. Being in cover means that the targeted unit is at least half in a terrain feature or at least half hidden by a terrain feature from the shooting model's actual point of view. For example, there are 10 assault grunts in this unit, but only 5 of them are visible to the Battle Brothers firing at them. This means, for the Battle Brothers, instead of hitting on 3s, which is their quality, they are instead hitting on 4s. But beyond that, combat is resolved in exactly the same way. Also, here's another example of the unit being in cover. Even though they can technically be seen by the shooting models, they are in a piece of terrain, and you just need to discuss with your opponent before the game what the standards will be for each piece of terrain and how you're going to treat it. Obviously, if none of the enemy unit can be seen, then there is no line of sight, and it cannot be shot at. But consider using some common sense. If only like 10% of a unit can be seen, or just an appendage is sticking out, be a good sportsman and don't count it as line of sight. This is an unwritten thing, and you know it when you see it. If you get into a total logjam, just roll a dice 50-50 to see which way it goes. When the shooting has been resolved, the last thing to do is check for morale. In our example, the original size of the Assault Grunt unit was 10. 10 models that can absorb 1 wound each, so its starting strength is 10. Now, whenever it takes damage that brings it down to half or less of its starting size, it needs to take a morale test. In our examples so far, the unit has only lost 2 models, leaving 8, which is obviously more than half of its starting strength, so no morale test has been needed. The activation is done, and now it's the other player's turn. But let's imagine that instead we're kinda deep into the game. This unit has 6 models left, the Battle Brothers shoot and kill 3 of them. Now they've been reduced to 5 or less, so a morale test is needed. A morale test is a single die roll trying to get the unit's quality. In the case of these Assault Grunts, they need a 5 up. If the result is 5 or higher, they succeed, the activation ends, and now it's the other player's turn. But if the morale test was failed, the unit becomes pinned. Put a marker of some sort next to it so you don't forget. Pinned means that the next time that unit is activated, you will remove the pin token and do nothing else. No movement, no combat. Its turn is basically wasted, trying to shrug off the battle shock. Also, pinned units automatically fail any additional morale tests that they might take while they are pinned. And, if they end up in melee, they can only hit on natural 6s, regardless of their quality or any special abilities. Melee. If the unit performed the charge action for its movement, that means it ended its movement with at least 1 model in base contact with at least 1 model of an enemy unit. After the charge is complete, having made as much base contact as possible by moving each model in the unit up to 12 inches, then the enemy shuffles in by moving each of their models by up to 3 inches in order to maximize base contact to the extent possible. After the enemy's 3-inch moves are complete, the scrum is ready to go. Any models that are within 2 inches of an enemy model will be able to participate in the fight. Attacking in melee works exactly like shooting. First, the charging unit rolls a number of dice as stated by its melee weapon, trying to achieve its quality. Any misses are removed, and then the defending player tries to roll their defense. Any failures are wounds, and those models get removed. So far, exactly the same. Now comes the difference. After the defender removes their lost models, the defending unit can choose to strike back if they want to. If so, this is done in the exact same manner. The defender rolls to hit, the charging unit rolls to defend and removes casualties. Then we handle morale, which is also different in melee compared to shooting. Once the defender's counter-strike is done, or if they chose not to strike back, you compare which side inflicted more wounds. Whoever did is declared the winner of this melee. The winner of the melee does not take a morale test in any case. The loser of the melee must take a morale test as described earlier, a single die roll trying to get their quality. However, there are several different outcomes. If the morale test is passed, then we're all done. The activation is over, and it's the other player's turn. But if the melee morale test was failed, one of 2 things will happen. If the unit is still greater than half its starting strength, it is pinned. But if it's at half or less of its starting strength, then it is routed. Remove the rest of that unit from the battlefield. After morale is taken care of, the remaining attacking unit backs up all of its models by 1 inch so that there's no more base contact with the enemy. If one of the units was totally wiped from the table, then the surviving unit can immediately make a free move of up to 3 inches. After that, the activation ends and it's the other player's turn. Okay, melee sounds complex, and yes, it is more complex than shooting, but after 1 or 2 scrums, you'll see it all makes perfect sense. It's very easy to memorize how things work. Now, one more consideration that I didn't bring up a moment ago is that in a single game round, a unit could end up fighting in melee multiple times. If that unit charges, it'll fight in melee, but then if it gets charged during the other player's turn, it will again fight in melee if it strikes back. And in fact, this can happen any number of times. So, there is a rule that after a unit's first melee of the round, that unit will only hit in melee on natural 6s from then on until the end of the round. This sort of represents battle fatigue. And this is why a unit that has been charged might choose not to counterattack and instead just take the beating, because they might be saving up their full strength for a charge that they intend to do on their turn. This is where the micro-tactics and decision-making can become very rich. I've played a few battles that were almost totally melee-oriented armies, and it's a very different feel, very different way of thinking compared to positioning your guns and letting loose. Building an army. Now that we understand the basic mechanics of the game, we can talk about how to put an army together. Before the game, the players agree on a point total. I personally like to do 3,000 to 4,000, but a good total for starting out is 750. With the total in mind, just start selecting units from the menu. The point total is in the far right column, and most units have some upgrade options listed in this column. These letters correspond to the tables on the lower half of the page and are pretty self-explanatory. Also, note that you can combine two of the same unit together into a double-sized unit, but any upgrades you took that affect all models in the unit must be purchased for both halves. So let's do an example. I'll buy a unit of 5 Battle Brothers for 150 points. They have access to packages A and E. So in package A, there are 4 headers available, and you could choose any number of them, combine any of them, but I'm really at the moment only interested in the bottom one. I'm going to take one assault rifle attachment, particularly the plasma rifle. So in my list on the left, I'm going to change one of those models to having a plasma rifle. And I'll change the point total, adding 15 points to bring me up to 165. Package E has 3 headers to it. The first one, upgrade all models with veteran infantry. I think I'll take that, so I'm going to add that to their special abilities over on my list. And add 50 points. Pricey, but worth it so that they're hitting on 2s instead of 3s. The middle header, don't see much there. But in the third one, I do want to replace one assault rifle for a laser cannon, adding 45 points, and bringing the total up to 260 for this unit. Now I'll start a second unit of Battle Brothers, 5 models, 150 points. Again, from package A, I'm just going to take an assault rifle attachment for one of the brothers. This time I think a flamethrower will do. That's 15 points. And from list E, I'm just going to take a plasma cannon to replace one of the assault rifles. So I'll modify that over in my list and add on the points. Now I would like to combine these 2 units into a single 10-man unit. The problem is, I purchased an upgrade that affects all models. Recall that on the first unit, I gave them veteran infantry, and that upgrade specifically affects, quote, all models. Therefore, I must purchase it for the other unit as well, raising it from 195 to 245 points. Now I can combine them and treat them as a single 10-model unit that has a total cost of 505 points. In my personal experience, this is not a good idea in smaller games due to sheer cost and vulnerability, but up above 2,500 points or so, designing double-sized units becomes quite fun. With your army list ready, assemble models from your collection to represent it. I like to use Citadel miniatures from Games Workshop, but literally anything works, even 2D cardstock miniatures if that's all you can afford. As long as they're reasonably sized, any models are valid. Frequently asked questions. What happens with a unit of a defense of 4 up gets hit by a weapon with AP 4? Answer: it rolls defense on an 8 up, which is obviously impossible, but remember that a natural 6 is always a success. What if a model has more than one melee weapon? Answer: they can attack with all of them. Can a unit charge multiple target enemy units? Answer: no. Can a unit shoot at multiple enemy units? Answer: yes, you may split fire among multiple targets if your unit has more than one type of weapon. For example, our unit of Battle Brothers earlier has to put all of their assault rifles into one single enemy unit. but their rifle attachments, the plasma cannon, and the laser cannon could all be assigned to different targets if you want. If a unit splits fire as just described, are all of the targets declared before any rolling happens? Answer: the rules are silent on this, but I prefer to house rule that yes, you must declare all shooting targets and then begin rolling to hit. What is the difference between blast and deadly? Answer: weapons with blast multiply their hits by X, and deadly weapons multiply their wounds by X. So, a hit from a Blast 3 weapon requires the defender to roll 3 dice, and each failure is 1 wound. A hit from a Deadly 3 weapon requires the defender to roll a single defense dice, but if it fails, then that hit becomes 3 wounds instead of 1. Important note here, that hit from the deadly weapon was assigned to a single model, so all 3 wounds must go on that model. Any overkill is simply wasted. So, use your deadly weapons on big targets that can take more than 1 wound, such as tanks and monsters. Those units will have the special ability Tough, which simply means that they can absorb X number of wounds before they're removed from the table. What about vertical terrain distances? Answer: the rules are silent on this, but I prefer to house rule that any non-flying unit must include vertical distance in the measurement of their movement, with 1 inch given for free. For example, this battle brother wants to rush up this cliff, which is 3 inches high, so that eats away 2 inches of his movement. How do I read the upgrade headers? Answer: pay close attention to the exact wording of the headers. It matters very much. If it says replace 1 assault rifle, that means you can only upgrade 1 model in the unit with that feature. If it says replace any assault rifle, that means you can purchase it for as many models as you want, paying that listed cost for each one. And as we covered earlier, if it says upgrade all models with, then you do just that. But note that the listed cost accounts for all the models. So earlier when I bought Veteran Infantry, I didn't pay 50 points 5 times. I only paid it once, because the header says that this upgrade affects all models in the unit. Can I shoot an enemy unit that is in melee? Answer: any enemy unit that is in line of sight and range can be shot at. After every melee, the attacker is required to back up by 1 inch at the end of its activation. There is no such thing as being tied up in melee. In fact, at the beginning of every unit's activation, there should be no enemy-based contact occurring anywhere on the table for either side. Resources. OnePageRules.com has all the core rules and army lists free for download. There are also several other games, not just Grimdark Future. If you join their Patreon, you gain access to some other goodies like the full-blown rulebooks, 2D and 3D printable miniatures, and the point calculator system that allows you to design your very own army list from scratch using the official formulas that were used to create the game. There's an active forum. It's the perfect place to post a question, a battle report, or talk about OnePageRules. There is a subreddit for OnePageRules. It's generally not as active as the forum is, at least at the time of the making of this video, but it's part of the community nonetheless. There is also an active OnePageRules Discord. I've produced many Grimdark Future battle reports. There's a playlist for them on my channel, and if you want to see the game in action in real time, go ahead and watch a few of them. Lastly, there's a link below to the Word doc template for the army list format that I personally like to use. This is by far the thing I get requested the most. It's not official material, it's just the way that I personally like to organize my list on paper to have at the table during the game. So, here you go. Well, if you're a brand new wargamer, hopefully that was helpful to get you jump started. If you're not, then hopefully you'll give this a run. It is interesting how, if it weren't for this game, I wouldn't have dropped several $1,000s on Games Workshop models. So yes, it's an indie design that on its face might compete with Warhammer 40k, but truth be told, it's been very good for business for Games Workshop because it made me buy more models. Better to think of it as a co-opetition. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'm Wylock. Make things and play games.